Okay. So my famous woman is Helen Gwynne-Vaughan. She was a very big influence with women's involvement in the military. Helen was born in London on January 21st, 1879. She was born into a wealthy Scottish aristocratic military family. Her mother was a novelist, and she was a granddaughter of a Scottish baronet. Her father was an army captain. However, her father passed away when she was a young girl, and her stepfather came into the picture. He was a diplomat, and his position required them to travel a lot. They didn't stay in one place. So she was educated by many governesses. And however, her last year of schooling, she attended Cheltenham Ladies' College. And then going into early adulthood, she attended King's College in London, and she was one of the first females to study there. Her studies were in botany and zoology, and she went on to become a research assistant, and she studied mycology as well, which is the study of fungi. And then she teamed up with Louisa Garrett Anderson to form the University of London's Women's Suffrage Society. Going into adult life, she was a very big contributor to the military during this time in her life, which is not something she knew would be her destiny when she was a little girl. But in 1919, there were lots of casualties in France, so women were sent over to help with cooking, typing, mechanics, driving, these types of jobs to free up men for the front lines. And Gwynne-Vaughan's family military background, as well as her involvement with the women's suffrage movement, earned her position as leader of the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps. And she was so successful in this position, she led over 10,000 women, that she was promoted to head of the Women's Royal Air Force. And during this role, she really focused on organization. She revised the standing orders, created a new administrative system, created a whole new uniform, opened a place to train officers. She introduced military protocol, and from there she was deemed Dame of the British Empire, and before she was deemed commander of the British Empire. And this was a really big turning point for women in the military because men began to change how they viewed women in the Air Force and then eventually the overall military forces due to Vaughan's successful efforts. Also in 1935, she formed the Emergency Services, which is an organization to train female officers. And in 1938, she was the director of the Auxiliary Territorial Services, ATS, which is a women's branch of the British Army. And despite her successes, she faced setbacks. She was often seen as too aggressive, too determined, too demanding, rigid, or controlling. She was seen as a micromanager, and she faced a lot of sexism and criticism from men. But like her successes mentioned in the previous slides, this led to huge contributions for women in a male-dominated field. And it also changed men's views of women in the Air Force. And I think this made a big impact into how they eventually viewed women in the overall military forces. Helen passed away on August 26, 1967, and I was inspired to do research about her because as a young girl, I had three career choices I wanted to pursue. I wanted to become either a teacher, a doctor, or go into the Army. And I just thought that representing one's country was so inspiring and so empowering. And however, I was drawn into the teaching field. My boyfriend's dad, his sister, and also his sister's fiance are all in the military, or they're currently retired, and I respect them so much for their involvement in the military. And after seeing how this woman paved the way for future women in the military, I felt compelled to do more research about her and to just learn more about her, and I was so inspired. And then here I have two video links for K-3 resources to use in the classroom. The first one is more about the history of Helen, and it moves up past, like after she dies, into the current day of women in the forces. And this was created by the UK National Army Museum, which is really cool. And the second link is a recruiting clip the British made to get women to join the Women's Air Force. And I think this would be really cool for kids to see, not only just clips from back then, but also they can compare it to the clips made for women, the American recruiting clips that were made, can compare it to those. and then also comparing it to like these were like ads back then and looking at what that type of ad looked like versus what your typical ad looks like you see on TV, and the purpose is totally different. Um, Also resources, but just to conclude, despite Helen's wealthy family aristocratic background, she was not a stuck-up person, and her involvement in clubs as a young girl really showed her that working class women need upper class leadership to help them flourish. And this translated over into her military position, and she was able to use her abilities to lead, really organize, and train thousands of women. And as an aristocrat, she proved a lot of stereotypes wrong. She wasn't one to flirt with men all day, and instead she showed them what women can do and then they can do it well. And this is what made her such a monumental figure in history.